But here's a question that might blow your mind right now: is the sand on your favorite beach actually older than the pyramids? If you stick with me till the end of this video, I'm going to take you on a journey to uncover the surprising truth about where beach sand really comes from and how it gets there. So, let's start with the basics. What is sand, anyway? Well, it's not actually tiny little grains of rock or stone that are just lying around, waiting for the tide to come in. That would be too simple. Sand is actually mostly made up of something called quartz. Now, you might have some quartz at home, but I'm guessing it's probably in a nice clean form, like a beautiful crystal necklace or maybe even a fancy watch. But the sand on the beach is nothing like that. It's been broken down into tiny fragments by millions of years of erosion and weathering, carried away by wind and water until it reaches the shore where it gets deposited along with other minerals and shells. But here's the thing: if you think about it, that sand isn't actually made up of individual grains from a bunch of random rocks or mountains somewhere out there in the world. It's more like a puzzle piece that fits together to create this beautiful landscape we call a beach. Imagine you're at a family reunion and everyone brings their favorite dish to share with the group. Your aunt brings her famous lasagna, your cousin brings a big bowl of spaghetti bolognese, and so on. But instead of individual plates with different meals, they all get mixed together in this big buffet. The sand is kind of like that. It's made up of tiny fragments from different rocks and mountains, all broken down into tiny pieces over millions of years, carried away by wind and water, and then deposited together to create the beach we see today. And just as you might take a bite of your aunt's lasagna and think, "Oh, this is delicious," we often walk onto the beach without thinking about where that sand actually came from. But here's something even more interesting: have you ever noticed how some beaches seem to have different colors or textures than others? Like maybe one has this beautiful white sand while another has darker sand with shells and other debris mixed in. What could be causing these differences? Well, it's not because the beach is trying to express itself through art. The color and texture of sand on a beach are actually determined by where that sand comes from. See, most beaches have sand that's been eroded from nearby mountains or rocks over millions of years. The white sand we see in some tropical destinations. That's probably calcium carbonate, the same stuff that makes up seashells and coral reefs. It gets crushed into tiny particles and then transported to the beach by waves and tides. But here's where things get really cool. Have you ever heard of a place called the Gobi Desert? Yeah, it's not exactly known for its beaches. In fact, most of it is pretty barren and sandy. But if you were to walk along one of the rare riverbeds in that desert, what would you find? Sand, everywhere. It's like the beach has come to visit the desert. And guess what? The sand on those riverbeds is almost identical to the sand we see on tropical beaches back home. Why? Because it all comes from the same place, ancient mountains and rocks. So, if the Gobi Desert can have a beach too, does that mean our definition of what makes a beach is a little loosey-goosey? Maybe we should just say a beach is any place where sand and water come together in harmony, regardless of their original location. That's not a bad idea at all. In fact, the truth is even more fascinating. You see, it takes about 100 to 200 years for sand to form into the beautiful white grains we love walking on. That's right, it's a process that spans centuries. The sand itself isn't actually native to the beach where you're standing. It gets there through something called erosion. Imagine your favorite pair of jeans, which have been with you since high school, wearing down day by day. That's basically what happens to mountains and rocks as they interact with wind and water over millions of years. The sand is like the faded threads on those jeans. It's made up of tiny fragments of rock that have broken off from a more massive source. But here's the mind-blowing part: some of the sand on your favorite beach might actually be from a mountain range on the other side of the world. It gets swept away by rivers, carried across oceans and eventually finds its way back to your beach. So, what you're walking on right now is essentially a tiny piece of a much larger story that spans continents and centuries. This journey isn't limited to just sand either. Shells, pebbles, driftwood, and even fragments of coral can all be carried along for the ride, creating a rich tapestry of textures and stories at your feet. But have you ever stopped to think about where this seemingly endless supply of sand actually comes from? What's it doing here, on your favorite beach, right now? Well, the answer lies in a fascinating geological process that's been happening for millions of years: erosion and weathering. Erosion is the gradual wearing away of rocks into smaller particles, and it's caused by the constant pounding of waves against the shore. Weathering, on the other hand, is more like how your clothes get worn out after a long hike. It's the breakdown of rocks due to exposure to wind, water, temperature fluctuations, and even the slightest touch of salt spray from the ocean. Imagine taking a granite mountain and leaving it outside in the desert for 1,000,000 years, what would be left? That's basically what happens to those rocks over time. Now, let's talk about how these tiny particles eventually make their way onto your favorite beach. It starts with rivers, which are like nature's highway systems. They pick up all sorts of material as they flow, from tiny sand grains to huge boulders, and carry them downstream until they reach the ocean. There, the constant pounding of waves breaks down those rocks even further into finer particles. These particles then get swept away by currents and deposited onto beaches, where they accumulate over time. It's a bit like how you collect seashells or interesting rocks on your beach trips, but instead of choosing them yourself, nature does it for you through millions of years of erosion and weathering. So next time you're building sandcastles or simply soaking up the sun, remember that each grain of sand has its own epic journey to get there. From distant mountains, carried by rivers that flow like lifeblood through the landscape, carving out canyons and valleys along the way. These tiny travelers, barely visible to the naked eye, are on a mission to reach the sea, a quest that takes them over rapids, around bends, and under bridges. They're not just any ordinary particles, you see, they're the remnants of ancient stones, worn down by the relentless pounding of water, like sandpaper smoothing out rough edges. As they journey downstream, they pick up speed, their momentum building with each passing mile. They're swept up in a swirling vortex of currents and eddies, twirling and dancing in the water like ballerinas on stage. And yet, despite this whirlwind adventure, they remain remarkably consistent, always flowing, never stopping, until finally, after millennia of travel, they reach their destination, the beach. But here's the thing, it's not just a one-way ticket for these sand grains. Oh no, as they arrive on the shore, they're not done yet. They'll be reshaped and reformed by the pounding surf, molded into the very landscape itself. It's a never-ending cycle of creation and destruction, with each grain playing its part in the grand symphony of erosion. Over time, some grains will get swept back out to sea, where they'll start the journey anew, while others will remain behind, gradually becoming part of the beach's ever-changing topography. Now, you might be wondering, why does this cycle even exist? Why can't we just have a perfectly smooth beach, without all these pesky grains getting in the way? Well, it turns out that sand on the beach is not just a byproduct of erosion, it's actually an essential component of the process itself. You see, when waves crash against the shore, they're not just pounding away at the rock face, they're also carving out tiny grooves and channels in the ground. And as they do this, they pick up loose grains of sand and carry them back out to sea. It's like when you're washing your car on a sunny day, the soap suds help lift dirt off the surface, allowing it to be rinsed away. In this case, the waves act like those soapy suds, lifting the sand grains off the beach and carrying them off into the ocean. But just as some of that dirt might stick around after you're done washing your car, a lot of that sand will get stuck in the crevices and cracks between the rocks, forming new beaches. And here's the amazing part, it's this constant process of creation and destruction that makes each beach so unique. Like fingerprints, no two beaches are exactly alike, shaped by their own individual history, weather patterns, and geological quirks. So next time you're walking along the shore, take a moment to appreciate the intricate dance between the waves, the wind, and those tiny, tiny grains of sand. So where does all that sand come from in the first place? Well, it's actually quite simple. Sand is just broken down rock, eroded into tiny pieces over thousands and millions of years by constant wind and water action. It's like your worn-out shoes, they start as tough leather, but eventually break down to a smooth sole and scuffed-up toes. That's exactly what happens to rocks near the ocean. They get battered and bruised by the waves until they're nothing more than tiny grains of sand. And just like how you shed skin cells every day, beaches are constantly shedding their surface layer of sand too, which is why it looks so different from one visit to the next. These tiny grains of sand are then carried away by the currents and deposited in other locations, where they'll be worn down again into even smaller particles. It's a never-ending cycle. So there you have it, folks, the beach is constantly being reshaped by the forces of nature. The next time you visit your favorite beach, remember that what you see today might not be the same as when you visited last year or 5 years ago. And that's because sand is always on the move. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe for more fun and educational content like this, including our upcoming episode on The Secret Life of Coral Reefs, where we'll take a deep dive into the underwater world to uncover some fascinating facts about these delicate ecosystems. But have you ever wondered what actually creates all that sand in the first place? It's not just washed up from far away, but rather it's been shaped and formed right here on our beaches over millions of years.